Hello, my name is Jeff Messier. I'm a professor in electrical and software engineering in the Schulich School of Engineering, and this is my orientation video for how we're going to be running the exams in ENCM 369. So the reason why we need an orientation video for these exams is because I run exams in a very particular way, and it's a format that you may not have encountered in the classes you've taken at the U of C up until now. So first of all, before I create any kind of exam, I try to keep in mind a series of objectives, right? So when you take a class, really the purpose of exams and assessment in general is to give you an incentive to learn in a particular way, right? So basically, if it's not on the exam, you don't study it, and that is the way it goes, right? And so with that in mind, I basically design my exams with two sort of, I guess, learning objectives. The first one is I want all students in ENCM 369 to gain a good understanding of all the concepts discussed in the lectures. So 369 is a very conceptual class. We talk about a lot of different ideas related to computer engineering, and I want you to have a good grounding in all of those ideas. The second thing I want is for you to be good at some what I think are core computer engineering skills. There are just some things that all computer engineers should know how to do. One of those things is embedded practical programming. That's what the labs are for. But there are other skills, things like understanding how to use fixed and floating point numbers, understanding bus values in a microarchitecture, knowing what a pipeline does and how it works. Those are core computer engineering skills that I want you also to be really good at. And so I design my exams to achieve both of these objectives. The other objective that I have is I want to design my exams according to the mastery sort of philosophy of learning, right? And the mastery philosophy of learning is that a course should give you the opportunity to master each part of the course content. And this means giving you a chance to improve, basically. So if you might be in a class, you're studying, you think you've really got a certain concept down, pretty strongly, but then you write the exam and it turns out you don't do as well as you'd hoped, right? So maybe you were a little weaker than you thought. Rather than never seeing that concept again and never having a chance to relearn it or improve it, I want to give everybody a chance to sort of make an attempt at every single one of the concepts. And if it doesn't go as well as you had hoped, for whatever reason, you should have a chance to revisit that technique, get stronger, and then try again. So in 369, we have two major exams, exams 1 and 2, and those are held during the term. We also do have a registrar scheduled 3-hour time slot during the final exam period, but no new material is examined during the final exam time slot. The final exam time slot exists exclusively for you to rewrite content from exams 1 and 2. One thing that is maybe a little bit different in 369 is that the standard way to write my exams is partially through D to L and partially on paper, even though the exams are completely in person. So these are not take-home exams. You do come to the exam room at the specified time and sit in the exam. However, if you have access to a laptop or a tablet that is Wi-Fi compatible, I ask you to bring it to the exam room. And then basically you just turn on your device, you open up the D to L quiz, and you do that portion of the exam live during the exam room. And this is, while it might be your first time doing in-person D to L exams, I've actually done this now for a couple of years, and it works great. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why I choose to do exams in this way as we sort of get further into the video. When you open up D2L, the exam will appear as a series of quizzes, and you will open up each quiz. There will be a randomized question for you to work on, and you submit your final solutions into D2L, and you submit it just like a regular D2L quiz. However, there is also a written work component. So you will be given a paper exam book as well, and you will put your written work inside the paper exam book. So for example, if you're working on a pipeline question, in order to figure out the value of the pipeline at a particular clock interval, you have to draw a diagram, right? So there's a pipeline diagram that you need to draw, and then there's a bunch of information you put on the diagram. All of that stuff you put in your written exam book, so you show your written work in the exam book, and then whatever your final answers are, that's what you submit into D2L. You do not have to scan a copy of this exam book and upload it like you did during COVID. You just simply put your name on the paper exam book, hand it in at the end of class. Another really important thing that I want to emphasize is that you are not required to have access to a laptop or tablet to write these exams. If you do have access to one, I really ask you to bring it. The reason why I do in-person D2L exams is because it helps lighten the marking load, and it makes it possible for me to have rewrites. If we didn't do sort of this in-person D2L stuff, if we just did all in-person paper exams, I wouldn't have the bandwidth to do rewrites. So this system makes it possible for me to do rewrites. And in the past, I've had the vast majority of my students were able to bring laptops or tablets to the exam. They completed the exam online in the exam room, and there were no problems at all. However, if you are someone who doesn't have access to a laptop or tablet, I will also provide you an all paper exam. And if you're one of those students, I'll get you to just identify yourself to me, and then you can do the all paper option. I will also have paper backups for you just in case you bring your laptop and for whatever reason the laptop, maybe the battery dies or it doesn't boot or something like that. So like I said, if you can, it really makes the class work if you can bring a device to the exam. You also get your mark immediately. As soon as you submit the quiz, you can see how you did on the exam. If it's a paper exam, usually it's a week or so, maybe 2 weeks before I get the marks back to you. So that's a reason to bring them as well. And associated with each exam is going to be an exam handout document, and I'm going to post these well in advance on D2L. And these exam handouts give you just more information about the exam. So they're going to provide the specific breakdown of the types of questions, how many questions you're going to see on the exam, the mark allocation for those questions. They're going to describe any formatting rules that you have to use when submitting your answers, and I'll talk more about formatting in a little bit here. And also, very importantly, it's going to provide any of the diagrams or reference materials that you need during the exam. So these exams are, officially closed book. However, you are allowed to bring a copy of this exam handout into the exam with you. And in fact, not only are you allowed, you will absolutely need to bring a printout of the exam handout because there's going to be some diagrams, particularly for exam 1, some diagrams in the lab handout that you're absolutely going to need to do the question. So make sure you bring one of those printouts. So I also want to talk a little bit about how marking is going to work for these exams. So in let's say a traditional engineering exam, if you want to call it that, an all paper exam, you might do a question that's out of 10 and your marker will take a look at the question. And of course, if it's completely correct, you get 10 out of 10. But if you make a mistake, then you might get 7.5 out of 10 if it's a small mistake, or you might get 4 out of 10 if it's a big mistake, or 2 out of 10 if it's a really, really big mistake. That's not how marking works in 369. Marking is, I do marking in a slightly different way because, again, I want to streamline the process to make it possible to have rewrites at the end of term. And so to start off, your final answers that you submit into the online quiz fields are automatically marked by D to L correct or incorrect, right? This is how D to L always works. So if the correct answer is 4 and you enter 2, you get 0 for that question. If you enter 4, then you get full marks for that question. Now, you'll notice once you start to do the practice exams that each one of my questions have multiple parts. So it's not all or nothing. There'll be many fields in each question, and you can get part marks by getting some of the fields correct and other marks incorrect. But each individual field is marked correct or incorrect. I also mark your written work. But I mark your written work only for method. I do not mark it regarding whether it's correct or incorrect. That's what D to L does for me. So, for example, if I go back to the pipeline example, you're required to draw some diagrams to figure out pipeline questions. And all I do when I'm looking at your method is to see if you've drawn pipeline diagrams. I don't sort of look at them and say if they're correct or incorrect. I don't circle mistakes. As long as you have basically the correct method to arrive at a final solution, you get full marks for your written. And basically, I mark your written work according to a rubric. You get good, or basically full marks, if sufficient detail is shown and all of your method is there. You'll get acceptable, so maybe a small amount of marks off. If some minor details are missing, but the method is still clear, so there's something that's kind of important that you should have written down, but you didn't, that's acceptable. Unacceptable is written work is missing one or more major details. Basically, I'm looking at it, and there is simply no way that what you have written on the page could have possibly resulted in you coming up with a final solution. And finally, missing if you just got nothing. So a couple of notes. It is possible for you to get full worksheet marks even if one or more of your quiz solutions are incorrect. Again, I'm just marking you for method. So if you make a few mistakes in your pipeline diagram, you don't have the right final values, you can still get full method marks. And it's up to D to L to give you sort of those marks for being correct or incorrect. But by the same token, if you just happen to get all of the D to L marks correct, but you don't show me proper method, then it's possible that you could be docked worksheet marks. In practice, this hasn't happened yet. So the vast majority of the students that I mark for method get full marks. You kind of have to, right? You've just simply got to do the method to find the solution. Only in a very small number of cases have I had to dock method marks. And the last thing I need to say is that even if you do an all paper exam, so if you don't do the D to L, I mark you exactly the same way. So you're just going to put your final answers in your paper exam instead of entering it into D to L, and I just give full marks or 0 on all of those questions, just like D to L would. So you don't get sort of like a special, more partial mark friendly kind of method if you do the all paper exam. Everybody is treated exactly the same. Now, the way I organize the content of the exams is I divide each exam into modules. And each module is actually going to appear as a separate D to L quiz. So for example, when you open up exam 1 in D to L, it will actually consist of 4 or 5 separate quizzes. You need to complete and submit each one of those quizzes. So you'll be actually doing 4 quizzes. You can have them all open at the same time. It's no problem. You can do the questions in any order. but you're going to have to submit multiple quizzes. The reason why I do that is to make rewrites easier. So when it comes time to rewrite during the final exam, what you're going to see is basically an exact copy of those same four quizzes. Now, let's say, for example, on exam one, the first quiz is, concept questions. The second quiz focuses on binary numbers, fixed and floating point. The third quiz is ALU, and the fourth quiz is microarchitecture. Let's say you do great on all of the quizzes except for the ALU quiz. You make a mistake or there's something that you didn't quite understand. When it comes time to rewrite, you only have to, or you can choose to only rewrite the ALU portion of exam one, and then your original marks in all of the modules you did great on will stand. So the multiple quizzes is basically a way for me to give you more flexibility and for you to rewrite only the exact pieces of exam 1 and 2 that you want to improve on. There are basically two types of questions on each exam. The first type of question are concept questions, and the second type are what I call skill questions. So concept questions, as the name suggests, are basically detailed multiple choice questions that verify you understand the concepts described in the lecture. These concept questions are basically identical. Well, they're not identical, they're not the same questions, but they're very similar to the questions that you've been doing already on the online quizzes, right? So no calculations, nothing like that, just basically asking you about the ideas presented in the course. Okay, how do you prepare for this? Well, the main thing is to make careful notes while watching the lectures, study them, and make sure you're comfortable with all the concepts that have been presented in the lectures. Basically the same way you prepare for the online quizzes. If you get the online quizzes, if you get an online quiz question incorrect, make sure you understand why you got it incorrect, right? Go back to your attempt. Was it just like, oh, you can see why you just sort of made a mistake? Or is there something there that you didn't really fundamentally understand? If there's some fundamental misunderstanding, make sure you clear that up before the exam. Skill questions are questions where you do have to do some kind of calculation or written method in order to come up with the final solution. And these questions are basically there to verify that you are proficient in certain key computer engineering skills that I want you to be good at. And with these skill questions, you will submit your final answer into DTL, and then you hand in your written work to be marked. So for the concept questions, there's no written work. It's just the multiple choice solution in DTL. But for these, as I've already described, you enter your final answer in DTL, but you also have some written method that I'm going to mark separately. Formatting is really important for the DTL part. I'm going to talk about that again in a minute. Now, how do you study for these skill questions? Step one is the assignments. So the purpose of the assignments is basically to get you ready for the exams. Make sure you're making a good effort on the assignments. When I post the assignment solutions, make sure you're going through those solutions and you understand them. And the second bit is make sure that you do the online practice exams. Another great thing about me implementing these questions through D2L is that I've literally generated 300 random versions of each question. And a particular quiz just draws one out of that pool of 300. So it's no problem at all for me to generate practice exams. So on D2L, I will post a series of practice exams that will be the exact type of question that you'll see on the actual exam, just with the contents randomized. And I'm going to give you, I think it's 6 examples of each type of question. And you'll see that each of those 6 have been slightly randomized. And it's that same kind of randomization you can expect to see on the exam. And so you must do these practice exams. This is absolutely the way to succeed in the skill question part of exams 1 and 2. And there's no surprise, right? These are the exact questions that you can expect. I'm not going to pull out a question you've never seen before. I don't believe that that is good exam practice. If there's something that I want you to be good at, I'm going to tell you what it is. You get to practice it, and then you get to show me how good you are at it. And that's sort of how these skill questions work. So formatting is a big deal. When you enter your final solution into D to L, it must be formatted correctly or it will be marked wrong. Now, this is partly because D to L just needs a particular format for it to do its auto marking, but also partly because formatting is kind of part of the question. So formatting requirements are strict. Even if you get the correct value, if your formatting is incorrect, it will be marked wrong, and I will absolutely continue to mark it wrong. So if you email me saying, "Hey, I had the right answer, but I just didn't show you the right number of bits," or something like that, I won't change your mark. It's going to stay. And so why, right? Why am I just so hardcore about formatting? There's basically a couple of reasons. First of all, the formatting is actually part of the solution, right? So if the example, if for example, I'm asking you for the value on the binary value being carried on a bus, and the proper answer is 3, right? And you just end it, and it's a 5-bit bus, and you just enter 1 1 into D to L, and it gets marked wrong, and you're like, well, how come 3 was the right answer? If it's a 5-bit bus, you have to show me the leading zeros. You need to show me the right number of bits. If you don't show me exactly the right number of bits, D to L will mark you wrong, and it should mark you wrong, because part of this isn't a formatting error, or I wouldn't think that this is a formatting error. This is, part of the question is you understand the value, but also part of the question is you understand the width of the bus that we're working with, which is a really big deal when you're working with microarchitectures. So the formatting, even though it seems fussy, is actually part of the solution for most of the questions. And the other reason is that, again, using D to L to mark all of these quizzes allows me to streamline the marking process, and it makes it possible for me to allow you to do a bunch of rewrites on basically any aspect of exam 1 or 2 that you want to improve on. If I need to now manually go through all the solutions to look for answers that are, quote unquote close, then that slows it right down, and then rewrites won't be possible, right? Like it's only this auto marking system that allows me to do rewrites. And so the formatting rules are going to be specified in detail on each exam handout, but here are some of the examples. So for example, if I'm asking you for a hexadecimal solution, do not give me any kind of prefix, right? So if the answer is, hex A4, I want you to give me A4. 0x A4 will be marked wrong. So don't give me a prefix. If I'm asking for a binary number, don't give me 0b and then the binary number. Just give me the binary number, right? No prefix. Another example of a formatting rule is that you need to use the correct number of bits and or hex digits. And again, that sort of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. By using the correct number of bits, including leading zeros, if applicable, that lets me know that like how wide the bus is we're working with, or how big the number is we're working with, which is a really important part of computer engineering. And these formatting rules, again, I'm kind of making a big deal about them, but they are very straightforward and they will not be a surprise. So I'm going to very clearly, specify the formatting guidelines in the exam handout. And the practice exams want you to use exactly the same format as the regular exams. So if you get used to the formatting requirements for the practice exams, they're exactly, the real exam runs exactly the same way. So there's absolutely no reason why you should say, oh, I had no idea I wasn't supposed to put 0x for my hex numbers. If you make that mistake, it means that you haven't attempted any of the practice exams. And if you haven't attended any of the practice exams, then there's a problem beyond formatting, right? So, these exams, I find generally that the exams are really or the marks are pretty high on these exams because you have a chance to practice. So make sure you're making the effort to put that practice in. And then finally, one, just to sort of conclude the video, just one little bit about, again, sort of looping back on marking. As I mentioned earlier, like a traditional, quote unquote, traditional engineering exam, there would be a mark out of 10. You would have some solution written down on paper, and then you might get 7.5 or 6.5 or 3 out of 10, depending on, how good your solution was. That doesn't really exist in that format in 369, right? In 369, there really are no partial marks due to the fact we're using D2L's auto marking feature. However, you're going to do great on these exams overall, I believe, or at least you will have the opportunity to do great on these exams for multiple reasons. First of all, I do mark your written work, right? So you still do get marks for method. So even if you make you make some small mistakes that reduce the amount of incorrect marks you get, there still will be some marks for you if you use the correct method. The D2L practice exams means that you should be very prepared for these skill questions. Again, it is so critical that you do these practice exams because the real exams are going to be exactly the same as the practice exams. So get good at the practice exams and you'll be good at the real exam. All the questions, theory questions, this actually should be skill questions. All skill questions are divided into multiple parts, right? So it's not all or nothing. If a skill question, if the D2L marks are out of 10, they'll usually be like 4 parts, sometimes 6 parts, sometimes 8 parts, each worth a couple of marks. And so, you'll be able to get partial marks just because I'm asking you for a number of solutions. And the big thing is the rewrites, right? So, I really hope that, the stress level should go way down on these exams, right? So first of all, I know this is kind of an unusual format, but just remember 2 things. First of all, the practice exams are exactly what you can expect in the real exam. And you know what? Not everybody has an amazing day when you write an exam. There could be something going on. Maybe you didn't have a chance to study as well as you would like, and you just don't do as well as you would hope. You get a chance to rewrite everything from exams 1 and 2. You could rewrite the entire exam 1 and the entire exam 2, and you would have enough time for that in 3 hours if you wanted to. So hopefully that brings the stress level down as well. And I've had all kinds of students do all kinds of things. Some of them won't even attempt exam 1, and they'll just say, well, I'll just rewrite it during finals when I'm less busy. I don't advise that, but you could totally do that if you wanted to. Or you might prioritize studying for one part of the exam, knowing that, the second part of the exam, you can, again, clean up during final exams when you have a little bit more time. So, I know there's going to be lots of questions about the exam, and, feel free to post all the questions that you have. But, I've designed these exams. I'm really happy with how I've designed these exams, both because it gives you a reason to learn the things I think are important for you to know. And I believe this is a very minimal stress way. I'm not going to say it's no stress. Exams are always stressful, but it really cuts the stress level down compared to some sort of 50% final exam where you have no idea what kind of questions you can expect. So anyway, hopefully this video helped you at least introduce you to how exams are going to be run. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions. Make sure you post them on the exam discussion forum on D2L, and you can ask me during the studio sessions as well.